On this Make It Once video, getting up to speed with my Weber progressive carburetor. What I thought may have been happening is that the accelerator pump was not able to squirt fuel into the carb when I was pushing down on the accelerator. But if I do that, I don't know, see if you can see this or not, but it does work. So you can see the fuel just dumped in there, so that seems to be working fine. The other thing might be that the choke is getting stuck. You can see that it just kind of is floppy. It gets stuck like this sometimes. So it could be that from sitting, some rust from the tank. Some rust from the tank caused by water moisture from the ethanol has gotten into the carburetor and has clogged up maybe the secondary jet, the idle jet. So I'm just thinking maybe it needs to be cleaned out. But it also doesn't explain why the main jet would be running so rich. It could just be that whoever did the jetting on the Weber wanted a little bit more power at the high end, and just kind of defaulted to running a little bit rich. Anyway, just some thoughts. I think the car still starts and still runs pretty good, but it does run rich at some point, and it still does have a little bit of a hard time starting. First tough start progressed really quickly, and I discovered there's no fuel pressure and the fuel pump had failed, so I replaced the fuel pump. Then the second series of hard start issues had to do with the fact that it started sitting around for a month, 6 weeks at a time. And so I quickly found that most people just blame the ethanol in the fuel. That the silliest kind of example was put some gas in a cup and watch how quickly it evaporates. And why that's silly is just that the carburetor is not a cup. It's sealed pretty well. And the reason for that is that I don't think fuel evaporates that fast. One thing that does happen with ethanol, it does draw in moisture, it collects moisture, and so anytime you have water in the fuel system, it's going to cause corrosion. It's going to be a little bit tougher to start. You bump up the octane a little bit, it becomes more stable. I should have a better start situation. So then I went through, I looked at the hoses, and I determined some of the hoses may have little leaks that's causing some evaporation. I believe that is a big part of it. Now, I think that the carburetor itself is just worn out. That old Weber has hundreds of thousands of miles on it, I think. So, I think that's where I'm going to head next. It's probably just due to be rebuilt. You could have... Hopefully you just saw that right now. Part of the reason why I'm coming onto the freeway is it lurched. Third gear, I dumped a lot of gas into it, and I lost power for a moment. Bunch of traffic, so I'm gonna get off here. It's a little bit loud. The jets probably are running a little bit rich the main jets. The idle jets possibly could be corroded, possibly could be a little bit small, but it's more likely that there's something wrong with the choke. Some of the needle valves or venturis could be a little bit corroded. Ethanol may have drawn in some too much moisture. So the next thing, I think, obviously, is just going to be to take the Weber carburetor apart and start trying to retune it, rejet it if necessary, replace parts that are worn out. I'm here with my Weber 3236 DGV. This is a manual choke. So I've been looking at it and I've determined, I think a lot of what the issue is that I can't get enough fuel into the throat at startup. So I pulled the choke all the way out. The butterflies are not completely sealed. So technically it should be okay. It says up to an 1/8 inch gap at startup. But what you want is that, so it's jammed. I have to jam it in there, it gets stuck. So you want it at slight tension, so as the engine turns and fires up, the vacuum can pull some air and it'll kind of like allow a little bit more air in there. So I think this whole butterfly choke mechanism is, and then if you start to look at all the details, this hole over here has been elongated. And then if you look at this little linkage arm here, twisted there. And it just is not, it's sticky and wobbly. That doesn't feel like precision instrument. It should be. So I think what happens is it gets stuck in that position. At startup, that's looking like more than an 1/8 of an inch. And so it becomes lean, so then you have to stomp on the pedal and get a lot of fuel in there in order for it to start up. And if the bowl is already kind of starting to evaporate, you don't have enough fuel sitting there to actually get it started. And I think Webers already have a problem with that. They need to be pretty rich at startup. After doing a lot of thinking and looking at some other issues with the fuel delivery, I finally took a look at the Weber and I know what to look for. So I've done an online search and I found 2 documents that seem to be helpful in understanding what may be going on. So the first one is a recommended jetting table from a carb dealer in Europe that has all the different Volvo models. So this one has 32, 36 DGV, probably just the basic B18, B20s. And it looks like it's confirming a couple of issues that I think might be going on. The second document is the original settings for the Weber. Now, obviously, my Weber could be different and could have been rejetted at some point, but I think it probably is standard. So if we compare the two to each other, the venturis look all the same until you get to the main jets. What comes from the factory is going to be 140, 135. What's recommended is 140, 125. So that means that the secondary main jet is a little bit too big, which would cause rich condition at the high end. The secondary jets are what's recommended is 60-50, and what comes from the factory is 55-50. So on idle, it could be a little bit lean, which also is something that I think might be going on. The primary and secondary air corrector jets, what comes standard is 165-60. What's recommended is 185-60. So a little bit small. So, and those are the jets that are on top of the emulsion tubes and have to do with the air fuel mixture. So again, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit bigger. Those 3 things could be what's contributed to all my issues. I think the next stage is just to open up the Weber, check all the jetting, and if need be, rejet and retune and see if that corrects all of my issues. Or maybe I don't have to rebuild the Weber.